Welcome back to the Crypto Intellect, your home for the latest XRP news, crypto market insights, and the big stories shaping the future of digital assets. Today we need to talk about something that has the entire XRP community paying attention. The headline is simple, but the implications could be massive. Trump just flipped, and many investors believe an XRP explosion could be imminent. Now before we dive in, remember, this is not financial advice. This content is for educational and informational purposes only, and you should always do your own research before making any investment decisions. But if you've been wondering why XRP has been holding back while other parts of the market have been showing strength, and why some analysts are suddenly becoming extremely bullish again, then you're going to want to stay until the very end because there are several pieces of this puzzle coming together at the same time. And when multiple macro, political, and institutional factors begin aligning simultaneously, that is usually when markets move much faster than most people expect. Over the last several weeks, crypto investors have watched something frustrating unfold. Traditional markets recovered. Major stock indexes pushed higher. Risk assets in certain sectors bounced back aggressively. Yet XRP and much of the broader crypto market remained stuck in a consolidation phase. For many investors, it felt like the market was ignoring positive developments. The infrastructure story remained intact. Institutional interest continued to grow. Regulatory conversations were improving, yet prices refused to fully reflect that optimism. This created a growing disconnect between sentiment and market performance. What we're seeing now, however, is a potential shift in that dynamic. Markets often move ahead of the news, and when large capital allocators begin rotating back into risk assets after periods of uncertainty, assets that were previously left behind can suddenly become the biggest beneficiaries. XRP has been one of those lagging assets, and history shows that lagging sectors can become leading sectors very quickly when macro conditions improve. One of the biggest developments affecting global markets recently has been the easing of geopolitical tensions that previously weighed heavily on investor confidence. During periods of uncertainty, capital naturally becomes defensive. Investors seek safety. Institutions reduce exposure to speculative assets. Liquidity becomes more selective. We saw exactly that play out during recent geopolitical tensions. Oil prices surged, market volatility increased. Investors shifted focus towards safety rather than growth. Crypto, despite its long-term potential, became one of the sectors that absorbed much of that pressure. The result was a market that appeared disconnected from its own fundamentals. XRP continued building its ecosystem story. Digital asset adoption continued advancing, yet market prices remained compressed. Now that tensions appear to be easing, investors are beginning to ask an important question. What happens when that pressure finally disappears? That question sits at the center of today's discussion and may help explain why bullish expectations are suddenly returning. What makes this situation particularly interesting is the role of political leadership and market perception. When investors talk about Trump flipping, they're referring to a broader shift in messaging, tone, and expectations surrounding economic growth, global trade, and financial markets. Whether you agree with the politics or not, markets react to perceived changes in policy direction. Investors care about outcomes, liquidity, growth expectations, and confidence. When market participants believe that economic conditions may improve, they often move capital accordingly. That appears to be exactly what some analysts believe is happening right now. A more stable macro environment combined with improving investor confidence creates conditions where previously overlooked assets can attract renewed attention. XRP sits directly in that category. It remains one of the most recognized digital assets in the world, and many investors believe it has not yet fully participated in the type of rally that could occur if broader risk appetite returns to the market. Another major factor driving optimism is the concept of capital rotation. Capital rotation is one of the most important ideas in investing because money rarely stays in one place forever. When one sector becomes crowded, expensive, or overextended, investors often look elsewhere for opportunities. We have seen enormous attention flow into artificial intelligence companies, major technology stocks, and high-profile public offerings. Those sectors captured headlines and attracted speculative interest. Meanwhile, much of the crypto market remained relatively quiet. The question now is whether that cycle is beginning to change. If investors start searching for sectors that have lagged behind, crypto could become one of the most attractive destinations. Within crypto, XRP remains one of the largest and most widely followed assets. That means any meaningful rotation into digital assets could have an amplified effect on XRP because of its visibility, liquidity, and existing investor base. What makes XRP unique compared to many other cryptocurrencies is its connection to the global payments and settlement narrative. For years, supporters have argued that XRP's long-term value lies in its potential role within international financial infrastructure. While price action has often disappointed investors in the short term, the broader thesis has remained remarkably consistent. Financial institutions continue exploring faster settlement solutions. Cross-border payment efficiency remains a major objective for banks and payment providers worldwide. Regulatory clarity, while still evolving, has improved compared to previous years. These developments did not disappear simply because the market entered a period of uncertainty. Instead, they continued building quietly in the background. That's why some investors believe current market conditions represent delayed recognition rather than a failure of the underlying thesis. If macro pressure eases and investor confidence returns, attention could quickly shift back toward these longer-term fundamentals. One reason many XRP holders remain optimistic is because they have seen this pattern before. Markets often go through periods where strong narratives are temporarily ignored. During those periods, prices may stagnate despite positive developments. Then suddenly, conditions change. Capital returns. Narratives regain momentum. Prices begin reflecting information that had already been available for months. This phenomenon is not unique to crypto. It happens across stocks, commodities, and other financial markets. The challenge is that patience becomes difficult when investors watch other sectors outperform while their chosen assets remain stuck. XRP investors know this feeling well, yet many argue that the current environment resembles previous moments when sentiment shifted dramatically. Those who remained focused on long-term developments rather than short-term volatility were eventually rewarded when market attention returned. At the same time, it is important to recognize that markets are still dealing with uncertainty. While optimism has increased, not every question has been answered. Investors remain cautious because previous periods of optimism were followed by renewed disruptions. Markets have learned not to assume that every positive headline automatically leads to lasting stability. That skepticism can actually be healthy because it prevents excessive speculation. What we're seeing now is a market gradually testing whether improved conditions are sustainable. If confidence continues building, capital flows could strengthen. If new disruptions emerge, investors may become defensive again. This balance between optimism and caution is what makes the current moment so important. The next several weeks could provide critical clues regarding whether this is merely a temporary bounce or the beginning of something much larger. When looking specifically at XRP, technical analysts are paying close attention to several key price levels. Technical analysis does not predict the future, but it helps investors understand where market psychology may change. XRP has spent considerable time attempting to reclaim levels that many traders view as confirmation zones. These are areas where buyers and sellers often battle for control. A successful move above major resistance levels could attract additional momentum traders and institutional interest. Conversely, failure to break through those levels may prolong consolidation. What makes the current setup intriguing is that XRP remains relatively close to several important technical thresholds. If broader market conditions continue improving and risk appetite expands, those levels could come into play much sooner than many expect. That's one reason excitement within the XRP community has been increasing recently. Meanwhile, Bitcoin continues serving as the market's primary indicator of overall crypto health. Historically, major altcoin rallies often occur after Bitcoin establishes strength and confidence returns to the broader market. Investors are watching Bitcoin closely because its ability to maintain momentum influences sentiment across the entire digital asset ecosystem. When Bitcoin demonstrates resilience, capital frequently begins flowing into alternative cryptocurrencies. That process often expands gradually before accelerating. During those phases, assets that lagged behind during periods of uncertainty can experience significant catch-up rallies. XRP supporters believe the token may be positioned to benefit from exactly that type of environment. If Bitcoin remains strong and broader market confidence improves, XRP could become one of the major beneficiaries of increased capital flows entering the digital asset space. Another encouraging sign has been the behavior of the overall crypto market. Analysts have observed periods where capital appears to be spreading beyond Bitcoin into a wider range of digital assets. This is important because broad participation often signals increasing investor confidence. When capital remains concentrated in only a few assets, markets tend to be defensive. When money begins flowing into multiple sectors, it suggests investors are becoming more comfortable taking risk. XRP's performance relative to the broader market will be worth watching closely because strong participation across the crypto ecosystem often creates opportunities for major altcoins to outperform. While nothing is guaranteed, the market structure appears considerably healthier than it did during periods of heightened uncertainty and geopolitical stress. The phrase XRP explosion imminent naturally captures attention, but it is important to understand what that really means. In financial markets, explosive moves rarely happen without a foundation. The biggest rallies often emerge after long periods of accumulation, frustration, and skepticism. By the time the broader public notices the move, much of the groundwork has already been laid. XRP has spent years building a passionate community while navigating legal battles, regulatory uncertainty, and changing market conditions. Many investors believe those challenges created a stronger foundation rather than a weaker one. Whether that belief ultimately proves correct remains to be seen, but it explains why excitement tends to increase whenever macro conditions improve. Investors are not simply reacting to a single headline, they are reacting to the possibility that multiple positive factors may finally be aligning at the same time. Institutional interest also remains a major topic of discussion. Large financial players generally move more slowly than retail investors, but their influence can be enormous once they commit capital. Over the past several years, institutional participation in digital assets has grown significantly. What was once considered a niche market now receives attention from some of the world's largest financial organizations. This trend matters because institutions often focus on infrastructure, efficiency, and long-term utility rather than short-term hype. XRP supporters frequently point to these qualities when explaining their long-term bullish outlook. If institutional adoption continues expanding and confidence in digital assets strengthens, XRP could benefit from increased attention among investors seeking exposure to payment-focused blockchain technology. For long-term holders, the most important takeaway may be that market conditions appear very different from those seen during the height of recent uncertainty. Oil prices have stabilized, investor confidence has improved, discussions about growth and risk assets are becoming more common. These shifts do not guarantee immediate price appreciation, but they create a more favorable environment than existed previously. Markets are ultimately driven by liquidity, sentiment, and expectations. When those factors improve simultaneously, opportunities often emerge. XRP investors have spent a long time waiting for conditions to become more supportive. Many now believe that process is finally beginning to unfold. Whether this marks the start of a major breakout or simply another step in a longer journey will depend on how these trends develop over the coming weeks and months. As we move forward, one timeline deserves particular attention. Markets need confirmation that improving conditions are sustainable. Investors want evidence that recent positive developments are not temporary. Every major recovery story eventually reaches a point where optimism must be validated by results. That validation could come through stronger price action, continued institutional adoption, improved macroeconomic conditions, or a combination of all three. Until then, caution remains appropriate. Excitement should always be balanced with discipline. The most successful investors are usually those who remain objective even when emotions run high. That principle applies to XRP just as much as it applies to any other asset class. What cannot be ignored, however, is the growing sense that something important may be developing beneath the surface. After months of pressure, uncertainty, and underperformance, several major pieces of the puzzle appear to be shifting in a more favorable direction. Political developments, improving macro conditions, capital rotation, institutional interest, and strengthening market sentiment are all part of the conversation. Individually, each factor matters. Together, they create the kind of environment that can produce significant market moves. That is why so many investors are watching XRP closely right now. They see a market that may finally be preparing to reward patience after an extended period of frustration. So here's the big question for you. Do you believe crypto is currently the most overlooked sector in this market rotation, and do you think XRP is positioned to benefit the most if capital begins flowing back into digital assets? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I want to hear what you think. If you enjoyed today's analysis, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the Crypto Intellect, and turn on notifications so you never miss an important XRP update. Share this video with anyone who follows crypto but may not be paying attention to the bigger macro picture shaping the market right now. As always, stay informed, stay prepared, and stay focused on the long-term vision. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.